So the kid who would be king is it's a fantasy for kids, and the best way that I would describe this film is it's a great starter fantasy, I would say, for kids. Its message is pretty blunt. There's no real like huge stakes here. There's plenty of danger, and it doesn't really cross the aisle as much for adults. But for what it is, for aiming for kids and presenting a fantasy action adventure that kids around like 8 to 12, I'd say, maybe somewhere around that range, I could see them getting into this. I could really see them getting into this. Even when at the screening I was at, there were plenty of kids who were digging on this. So it takes place in you kind of get the gist of it from the trailer, but what it is essentially, it takes place in modern day. I mean, we start off with a great prologue though of the story of King Arthur and when he fought off Morgana Le Fay, but with Excalibur and gathered his knights. It's a great illustrated opening there. So you already set the mood there, but then it shifts to modern day where you have Alex Elliott, who's played by Ruby Barnhill, who's kind of like a your average kid, average London kid. He goes to school. He struggles with his classes and his science projects. Tries to stick up for his nerdier friend Betters, who constantly gets bullied by the bigger kids, but he can't really do much. He still gets like knocked down, shoved down, and bullied, and he realizes the school won't help him. And he realizes that, in these times, you really gotta it feels like you're alone, like you've got to defend yourself. Because they do make a point of kind of like with 1980s fantasy, they really do kind of encapsulate the era when everyone seems more heated and like everyone seems to be angry and on the brink of war and distant, and nobody wants to team up, nobody wants to work together. They kind of keep it mostly in the background there, like he passes newsstands where there's big headlines of danger and war and the world is crumbling and it's terrible, which means it's perfect for the evil Morgana Le Fay to basically rise up from her hell and take over the planet during a solar eclipse that's coming up. Unfortunately, did I say his name right here? Yeah, Alex. Yeah, but fortunately, Alex is apparently or you think he is, a descendant of King Arthur, because he happens upon a sword on a construction site and pulls it out, and he thinks, oh, man, sword in a stone must be Excalibur. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how did that sword get there? How did the sword get in a construction site that only Alex seemed to know about, that only he was able to see? We could explain that with some, a little bit of like, magical deception or it was placed there long ago or someone buried it before, but it's not important, not important. What is important is that Morgana is going to invade the world, and she's slowly sending up demonic skeletons with flaming swords and fiery horses, and she's soon going to come up as this giant serpent dragon or whatever, and she's going to take over the world, and basically Alex has got to use the sword to defend himself. And he can't do it alone. He's going to need some help. Fortunately, he gets told a lot of the stuff about Morgana from Merlin, who's played in 3 different forms. In one form, he's a teenager who's played by Angus Imrie. Angus Imrie, who's kind of got like the long neck there, kind of a teenager, mostly as a disguise so that he can blend in with Alex's school, kind of. A little bit. He kind of sticks out there. You can tell, the shirt doesn't quite fit and all that. In another form, in his more elderly form, he's played by Patrick Stewart. Not too much in the film, but for most of the film and for most of the great lines, he does pop up there. Which I gotta say, it is pretty funny to see to see Patrick Stewart in a Led Zeppelin shirt. And in his third form, he's an owl. So you got 3 different forms of Merlin there. And Merlin will try to help him out. He knows a little bit of magic. He can help out now and then, but his powers are limited. He can only do so much. He needs to keep himself constantly... He needs, this special, youth potion that's made out of these little odd ingredients. But fortunately, he can find them in fast food. I forget what the combination was. It was something like beetle blood and beaver piss or something like that. But fortunately, you can find it all in soda, ice cream, and fried chicken. So, it's kind of funny to see him kind of dying on all that for sustenance, to have him, spout this kind of like old style language and trying to deal with adults. And of course he does what every kid would love to do, which is just mind control adults. He does this kind of ridiculous little thing with his hands, and then the adults will obey him. No questions asked. But there's only so much he can do. He needs Alex to wield that sword and to defeat Morgana. So he's going to need some allies. So he decides to recruit Betters, obviously, because Betters is his best friend, is nerdy best friend, as you do. Like I said, 80s fantasy, it feels like a throwback to. And then he also recruits the bullies, because he knows they're very strong, needs strong people, but also because he needs to learn to trust people, especially when he knows that the bullies may betray him. He's got to just have faith in them, and also to uphold the code of always being honest and to always fight with honor. I love that. And then later he'll recruit the entire school when Morgana's forces decide to basically attack the school. So you have a whole bunch of kids fighting off flaming skeletons. And as weird as that sounds, it's actually pretty cute. It's it's not to say that it's funny or that it's trying to be cute. It's just kind of like, oh, it's pretty cool. You know, a bunch of kids are wielding swords and armor, and they get to defeat skeletons by taking the day off of class and using the school to defend themselves. Like that, all that stuff. That's actually pretty fun. That actually looked like I would have loved to have had a film like this when I was a kid growing up. Now, that being said, like, I know immediately what a lot of adults and parents are probably going to have issue with on this film, which is that its message, it's a positive message, but it's a very blunt one, which is essentially saying, like, they kind of say it in different ways in the film, but what they're essentially trying to say here is, you know, you can't fear the future. You have to have faith in youth and to, like, pass it on to the next generation and trust that, you know, that the next generation will be willing to work together to make the world a better place, even when it seems like the world is on fire, including a premonition they have where the world is literally on fire. That, you know, that kids just have to stick together like that. Yeah, it's blunt, and it really does try to hit home that message hard. But for a lot of kids, I don't think it'll bother them as much. You know, I don't think it's as quite as over the head as like as something like Wall-E, where it really tried to hammer that in here. Here, I think they make its message clear here, and they work it into the plot well. It kind of doesn't feel like an afterthought. It feels like it actually plays well with Alex trying to define himself here. Like I said, this film is mostly going to be strictly for kids. Like, if you're wondering if there's a lot of, like, you know, crossover, like if there's like in-jokes for adults, not so much here. It's most of the humor is mostly for the kids here. They make some references, like, you know, like to Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. They do reference like Mario Kart when one of the girls learns to drive when she has to get away from the flaming skeletons. And it's mostly just it's mostly humor that you would expect kids to make. A little bit more elegant, have like a little bit of a bigger vocabulary, but still very, very kid-centric. And there's something very admirable about that film. About a film like that when it tries to be very youthful about it. And I kind of expected that a little bit because this is directed by Joe Cornish, who you might remember did a sci-fi film that was also about youth that took place in the UK called Attack the Block, which did feel very, very centric to a younger crowd here. And here, this is an even younger crowd. And yeah, it is very blunt with its message, so saying that, you know, these are tough times, that, you know, you got to stand up to bullies and, you know, to be the hero. Very classic type storytelling stuff. You could pretty much predict most of this plot as it goes. And it doesn't try to like weave any like extra bits of humor or try to present anything all that surprising here. Most of this kind of goes by the letter, kind of what you expect. Like, if you've seen the trailer, you can pretty much guess how this story is going to go about. But that being said, you know, for a film that just wants to be, you know, kids running around with swords and going on an adventure and learning classic, you know, traits of heroism and, you know, having faith in each other and teaming up to fight demonic forces, it's actually pretty fun for what it is. I would say it's like I said, it's a great starter fantasy, and I say that only because when I was coming out of the screening, I heard some kids who are coming out, they were saying that, you know what, that was pretty good. Is there any more like that? Is there any more like that? And then, of course, you know, you're obviously, well, then you gotta watch Harry Potter, you gotta watch Lord of the Rings, maybe some Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. I mean, like I said, this is a good film to get kids interested in watching more fantasy. I mean, the stakes are fairly low. I mean, you know, no one really has like a horrible death in this film. None of the kids are killed. There's no like violent stabbings or anything like that. Even for a film that has, you know, swords being swung around and demonic forces that want to kill Alex, it's it's not too bad. The stakes are kind of like, you know, from low to medium here, where I think most kids could enjoy the action without being too scared by it. So like I said, yeah, it's a great starter fantasy. I think it's perfectly suited as a family matinee. I think if you're, you know, if it's Saturday, you know, like a Saturday afternoon, just want something to do with the kids and just want something that's a little bit exciting, but that's more geared towards the kids, The Kid Who Would Be King is actually a really solid film. So for The Kid Who Would Be King, 3 out of 5 stars.